Hey guys, it's Nick, and it's that time of year. It's the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, I want to make the announcement that I do have the bracket challenge live, where you can now join the link down in the description down below. Also, in the first pinned question comment down below, I will have the link as well for the fact that the bracket challenge is live for you guys to join to just have fun and create your own brackets and prediction for the Stanley Cup final and playoffs. This year, it's going to be an interesting one as it's a bloodbath to the East, and the West is wide open. It's the Wild West of in the Western Conference and the gauntlet of the East. That's how it's going to be because the Eastern Conference, any team could come out of it where good teams could be eliminated in round one. That's how much of a bloodbath we could see come from the um Eastern Conference. You have the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins, who are going to be a tough one to come out and be able to get knocked out in the playoffs. You're going to have teams who bolstered their rosters at the trade deadline in that Eastern Conference, battling hard and still have a possibility of not making it far in the playoffs. That's how this playoff is when it comes to the East. The West, it's a little bit wide open. You could see teams that you don't honestly predict going far. The West, it's a closely contested matchup, in my opinion. You have a lot of good teams in the playoffs in the West that, frankly, are a much evenly matched up performance wise than a lot of people think. Maybe the fact you have um Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on one team with all three of those players surpassing the century mark on the season, that could be a tough one to match. But it's going to be an interesting playoff to say it from the beginning to end. So let's get into my predictions to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Okay, let's get into the bracket challenge. So let's create my bracket. Windy City Hockey. Right there. And we're in. So the NHL changed up the bracket challenge layout, which looks cleaner in my opinion. I prefer it having the Western Conference logo, Eastern Conference logo on the background. It's more in a dark mode. I think it looks nice with how the NHL kind of made the Stanley Cup playoff logo last year boring, and it's the same one as this year. So let's get into this. We'll start out in the East, then we'll go over to the West. In the Eastern Conference, to start out with, it's the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins taking on the second wildcard team of the East, the Florida Panthers. Their analytics right here, Boston versus Florida layout, 121 points for the Bruins to the Panthers 83. The Panthers barely made the playoffs because the Hawks needed to eliminate the Pittsburgh Penguins for the Panthers to really do make the playoffs. And the Hawks kind of did that by Pittsburgh laying an egg. Power play, Panthers actually have the edge in it, but the PK, the Bruins. In my opinion, Boston also has a better goaltending, better team all around, team play. They were the best team in hockey this year and had one of the best regular season performance of all time. I kind of have to take Boston here, even though I really don't care for Boston going into the playoffs this year. I don't know how I feel about it. Then we'll go into the rematch of last year. The Toronto Maple Leafs facing off against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Toronto, getting home ice advantage in this series, so if this thing goes 7, Toronto gets the extra home game in the series. 84 points for Tampa, 94 points for Tampa, 98 points for Toronto. My bad there. It's pretty even split, honestly, and on each stat, it's pretty similar to the point. Tampa, in my opinion, has the edge for goaltending and experience. Toronto, yes, they've been in the playoffs every year for the last few years, but they still cannot get out of the first round. But the acquisitions and trade deadline for Toronto kind of helps them. They got Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty. They also picked up Ryan O'Reilly. They picked up some key acquisitions in the trade deadline. Tampa Bay, not so much. Tanner Jeannot for overpayment, if you ask me. But they do have the goaltending edge, in my opinion. But I think it's finally going to happen. The Toronto Maple Leafs will advance to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Who would have expected that? The reason here I'm going with it, Tampa Bay's been in the Stanley Cup the last 3 years. And going into the playoffs this year, they looked kind of exhausted of playing hockey. And it just seemed like they don't have what it takes, like what they were doing in previous years. Tampa Bay just seemed off. It didn't seem right how they were playing. They kind of let Vasilevsky out to dry quite a bit this year. And it just seemed like Tampa Bay kind of seems off-putting going into the playoffs. They just don't seem like that Tampa Bay Stanley Cup caliber team they've been. So I'm taking Toronto in the series. Kind of a strange predicament here, but I'm kind of doing it. Okay, so let's get into the Metro playoff. The Metro Division champion of the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the wild card team, the New York Islanders. This is an interesting matchup as you look at the analytics and point differential for 103 points for the Hurricanes versus 87 for the Islanders. But I personally would take the goaltending of the Islanders over the goaltending of the Hurricanes. Also, with the fact how the Hurricanes were going into the playoffs kind of playing not good hockey. They nearly lost the first seed in the Metro side by playing some lackluster hockey in the last few months of play. The Islanders were fighting to get to the playoffs, and they did. They made it, and here they are. Power play edge is the Hurricanes, same with PK. Goals against per game, kind of similar, fairly similar. Goals per game, little edge on the Hurricanes. But it's playoff hockey, and I do take the Islanders in this matchup. Without Svechnikov for the Hurricanes just don't seem like they are that team to go far in a playoff run. And also, they just seem like it seems like a disconnect since they've lost Fetch going into the playoffs now. Here's the interesting one coming up. The New Jersey Devils taking on the New York Rangers. Haven't seen this matchup in a while. I believe 2012 was the last time we saw the Rangers and Devils meet in the playoffs. And, well, here we are. 102 points for the Devils. 98 points for the Rangers. Goals per game. 3.27 for the Devils. 3.33 for the Rangers. Goals against. 2.707 for the Devils. 2.667 for the Rangers. Power play, 22.9 for the Rangers, 21.3 for the Devils. PK, 82.16 for the Devils, 80.48 for the Rangers. Leading scorers, Jack Hughes for the Devils and Zibanejad for the Rangers. This matchup is going to be an interesting matchup. The Rangers locked in, went for it all by going after getting some key players for a playoff run. Of course, the great number 88, Showtime himself, Patrick Kane, playing for the Rangers. It's so weird to see him playing in that uniform because of how many great years we saw him here in Chicago. And with also bringing in Tarasenko from St. Louis, going to the Rangers. And then the Devils, bringing in Timo Meier, good acquisition. The Devils, though, going into the playoffs, this is the first time in a while. The last time they made the playoffs was the fact Taylor Hall basically dragged the team to the playoffs. This time around, the team works as a team, and they play good hockey. Both teams play similar styles, but I do give the goaltending an edge to the Rangers with Shesterkin, and the fact is, I would take the experience of the Rangers over the Devils in this matchup. Now we get to predict the goals, how many games each of these series take. Well, Bruins, I would say with the fact that Bergeron is a question going into the playoffs to start, I'm going to say Bruins in 6 over the Panthers. Toronto, Tampa, I'm thinking it's going the distance. 7 for in Toronto's favor. Islanders, Hurricanes. I really like the Islanders going into this playoff matchup. I'm saying 5. Rangers, Devils, how close it was in the regular season, how similar style of play they play. It's a 7-game matchup. And those are the games for the West, I would say. If it will load. Alright, now the Western Conference. Colorado, Seattle. Colorado winning the Central Division. Seattle making it to the playoffs for the first time and getting the first wild card spot. Here's their analytics. Kind of similar in point matchup. 94 for the Avalanche, 90 for the Kraken. Seattle actually won the season series matchup, if I'm not mistaken. The Avalanche are the team going in as the defending Stanley Cup champions. They have the depth. They are without Gabe Landeskog. And if they go without Cale Makar at any point in the playoffs, they're going to have a tough time, in my opinion. But Georgiev has played great hockey. Kind of, I think, a unsung hero for the Avalanche this year. So, I think the experience of the Avalanche kind of edges the Kraken just because last year Stanley Cup champions versus a team who's never made the playoffs yet. I kind of think it's a good pick with the Avalanche, even though, hell, Seattle could upset the Avalanche, but I just don't think it is because the goaltending is a question with who goes for Seattle with the fact they have Martin Jones or the option of Philip Grubauer, and both goalies have not been the greatest. Jones started out great with Seattle, then kind of faltered and went back to his normal style. But there's that. We'll go over here. We'll go over to the Pacific here real quick. The Pacific Division winners of the Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Winnipeg Jets. This is a rematch playoff round from a few years ago. And here's their analytics: 99 points for the Golden Knights, 85 for the Jets. Home ice, of course, to the um, Golden Knights. But this Jets team, I give the edge right now, goaltending, Winnipeg with Hellebuck. If Hellebuck stands on his head, this series could really go on the side of the Jets. Goals against per game, really 2.813 versus 2.84. It's a very similar stat right there. Um, Goals per game, yes, the Golden Knights play more offensive powered, but it's still fairly close. Power play, edge to Golden Knights, PK, edge to Winnipeg. This series could be a fun one to watch, and the fact is, I will still take Vegas over Winnipeg just because Vegas is the better has the better numbers, and they've just seemed like they are ready to go for a long push again for a playoff run. So Vegas over Winnipeg. Now we'll go with this rematch from last year's playoff, the Edmonton Oilers versus LA Kings. Again, very similar in stats. And the special teams, though, it's the edge to the Oilers with that power play of theirs. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. 3 100-point scorers in the NHL. McDavid, of course, winning the scoring title and goal scoring title. They're on a run, and I think this series could be close. If Korpisalo plays good in net, maybe the Kings can squeak out it. But this series went, if I remember correctly, 7 last year. I think this series could end quick with the Oilers in favor. Then here's the one series that is very intriguing to see: the Dallas Stars versus Minnesota Wild. We don't know who's going to be the starting goalie for many. If it's Marc-Andre Fleury, I kind of expect it to be Fleury versus in this matchup to start. If he has a rough go at it, they probably will put Gustafsson in net versus the Dallas Stars, and who had a resurgence of this year. They played a lot better, and they played a good all-around team play. Acquiring Max Domi did not really work out for the Stars in the regular season, but Domi plays well when it comes to playoff hockey. The Wild getting Kaprizov back from injury, and they played great without him. I really like Minnesota, and I think it's time for Minnesota to go in a little bit of a run here in the playoffs. So Minnesota over Dallas. Games for per series. Colorado versus Seattle. I kind of think Seattle is going to squeak out maybe 2 wins. So Colorado in 6 if it reads. Dallas versus Minnesota. We'll go here with a 7-game matchup. Vegas versus Winnipeg. As I said, if Winnipeg has that match where Hellebuck stands on his head every night, I could see this thing going far. If Vegas goes out, plays strong offense, and the Jets have not much offense going for themselves, it could end quick. I'm going 7. No, I'm going 6. I think 6 is a fair choice to go here. Oilers versus Kings. As I said, I think the Oilers kind of are in for a good playoff here. 5. And that's my selections for the West game matchups. Okay, now we're into the final 8 here. Colorado, Minnesota, Vegas, Edmonton, Toronto, Boston, New York versus New York. This should be a fun one to go through. We'll go here with the West. Minnesota, Colorado. I really think this is an interesting matchup as we see here. I think the points are messed up here for some reason because Colorado won the division and it's showing as 94 points for Colorado, which I don't. That's and 97 for the Wild. That is obviously messed up. So 100 and yeah, the points are messed up here. 109 points for the Avalanche versus 103 for the Wild. There's a mess up right here. So we won't get involved there again. As I said, I think we could see Minnesota in for a good playoff run. I like their roster construction and what they've had going for themselves. They were playing some good hockey going into this playoff. Colorado, yeah, good hockey going into the playoffs. But I think it's time for Minnesota to actually break through and make it to a conference final. We'll go over here now. Rangers versus Islanders. Should be an interesting matchup. Islanders has a great goalie in Sorokin. Rangers, great goalie in Shesterkin. Um, I think we see a matchup here where goaltending could lead to a big factor, and uh, the fact that the Rangers play more of a run and gun score offense versus the Islanders playing more of a structured defense, which tends to play well in playoff hockey. But I'm thinking the Rangers here will be the victors. We'll take the series in this one. I think it goes 7. Battle of New York. If it goes 7, that means you have a great playoff no matter what when it comes to an inner city matchup. That's the same with the Devils Rangers series because they are fairly similar in distance, even though the Devils play in New Jersey, the Rangers play in New York City. Let's take on the Bruins Toronto series, I guess. No, actually, we'll go back to the West. Vegas Edmonton. I really think we see a series where the Edmonton Oilers may not have the goaltending, and Stuart Skinner, who played well and could get votes for the Calder this year. I think we see a goaltending matchup where, yes, you have a good goalie in Vegas. Do you have a question mark in Edmonton? But I think Edmonton's offense actually kind of over what the Okay, sorry about that. There was a glitch in the system. Um, so back to it. I think we'll see Edmonton knock out Vegas. I think Edmonton's offense and the way they play this year, I feel like McDavid's due. And the team is with 3 100-point scorers. That's something to be noteworthy because that's a lot of scoring. And I get it, scoring is up in the NHL, and I think Vegas could have a hard time knocking out Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent Hopkins in a 7-game series just because of the fact the scoring could lead to Edmonton's favor. Boston, Toronto. This one's an interesting one. As much as I want to say, I think Toronto can do it and upset the Bruins. I, I frankly don't see it happening. If the I will say this, if the Bruins face the Islanders in the first round of the playoffs, I would have taken the Islanders over Boston. But as we're now up to a series between two division rivals who play each other enough, that know each other enough, Boston just seems like they can come out in a 7-game series versus Toronto. And we see original six matchup in the Eastern Conference Final versus a matchup of the Minnesota Wild and Edmonton Oilers in the Western Conference Final. Here we go. As we get to the conference final, I frankly really like the Rangers in this matchup, but the Bruins play good hockey. It's going to be hard to knock out the Bruins in 7 games. I'm saying that right now. So, the Bruins versus Rangers, let's come back to them. We'll go over to the West, okay? Minnesota, Edmonton. This one could be a fun series to see, just because you see Kaprizov make it to the conference final. He could play some great hockey. You could see McDavid, who made it to the conference final last year and now have experience going a little bit the distance in the playoffs. I think they could have some fun opportunity to make it to the Stanley Cup final. I really do think it's the time we see the Edmonton Oilers actually go to the Stanley Cup final. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins lead the way to the Stanley Cup final. The New York Rangers versus Boston Bruins. We get a chance to see Kaner back in the conference final, even though it's playing in the Eastern Conference for a different team. It's so weird to still see him in a Ranger uniform. Versus the Boston Bruins, the Bruins who went for it all this year by playing hockey where where honestly a lot of people expected them to miss the playoffs at the beginning of the year, including myself, I will say that. Facing off against a team who made it to the conference final last year as well. This one's a tough series to predict, but I'm taking the Rangers. I do. I just don't know with the Bruins if they can sustain their reign of terror going through the playoffs on the gauntlet of the bloodbath the Eastern Conference is going to be. Same with the Rangers. They're going to have a hard time getting through that gauntlet because that Eastern Conference playoff is a bloodbath for all the teams going into it. All right. We're at the Stanley Cup final. You have the New York Rangers versus Edmonton Oilers. You have a Canadian team in a Stanley Cup final. And you get a team who went for it all at the trade deadline, bringing in Patrick Kane, bringing in Vladimir Tarasenko to add to their already deep roster. This is a Stanley Cup final that could be a high-scoring Stanley Cup. You have a great goalie in Shesterkin. You have a solid rookie goalie in Stuart Skinner. Yes, he's still considered a rookie because he can be qualified for the Calder Trophy. This is a Stanley Cup final that could be an interesting one to watch. And we will do the tiebreaker first. Total of goals in the Stanley Cup final. I'm going to say 67 goals in the Stanley Cup final, where the New York Rangers are the Stanley Cup champions of this year, of the 2023 playoffs. Yes, I have the New York Rangers beating the Edmonton Oilers in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. Connor McDavid making it to the Cup final would be fun to watch. But could there be a little bit of sentimental value with the Rangers this year, with the fact one of the greatest Blackhawks of all time is playing for them right now, and Patrick Kane? Maybe. But I really think the experience with the Rangers and having those Stanley Cup caliber players who've won it all already, and kind of because the Rangers having Kane, having Tarasenko, I think their depth for the cup run could help that team go far in the playoffs and ending up the Stanley Cup champions. So, this is my Stanley Cup bracket, and we'll finish this off here in a now. All right. As you saw, I have the New York Rangers beating the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup. It was a tough one to predict, honestly. This is a tough playoff to predict, and as you saw, there was a couple times where the bracket challenge was crashing in the middle of me predicting, because I was recording and then crash, recording, crash. I had to edit a little bit to try and get it to work properly. But I do have the New York Rangers beating the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the Stanley Cup champions as well. That's going to be an interesting matchup if that ends up being the case. Again, make sure to join the bracket challenge, link down in the description down below and first pinned comment as well. Also, I want to say this, I will intend having my Blackhawks season review coming out pretty soon here, as the fact I was at the final game of the regular season for Jonathan Toews. Yes, there was a short review for that game after they played. So that will be coming out sometime this week. I will have the season review and recap of the entire Blackhawks season coming to you soon. But don't forget to make sure to join the bracket challenge, and thank you for watching the broadcast. Please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And most of all, let's go Hawks!